morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Justice Lubbie Harper Jr., and welcome to the Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparity in the Criminal Justice System Conference, entitled Demystifying Implicit Bias, Insights for Change. There are not enough words to describe how delighted I am to have the opportunity today to welcome such a remarkable audience and esteemed speakers here for this conference on implicit bias. I realize how busy all of you are, and I'm extremely grateful that you recognize the importance of this subject and have taken time to be here. Your presence sends a strong message that you do intend to acquire knowledge about the extremely important matter of implicit bias so that you can be a positive force in whatever role you fulfill as a member of the criminal justice community. Your presence also underscores your commitment to ensuring that our state's criminal justice system is fair and impartial. Yes, indeed, it gives me great pride to see the value people of Connecticut place on openness to emerging knowledge and the commitment to judicial excellence for the betterment of our state and the people within it. I hope that you will find the information and ideas you hear today will help you as you work towards that goal. I would be remiss if I did not thank the judicial branch for its ongoing support of the Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparity in the Criminal Justice System. I'm not sure if you know this, but the Commission has never received state funding to support its work. Our members participate on a voluntary basis and work on projects when they can find the time. Fortunately, the judicial branch has stepped up to the plate and provides a small amount of funding so that the Commission can contract for part-time support staff. I would like to thank my good friend and colleague, Chief Justice Chase Rogers, for her support, her commitment to access to justice, and her recognition of the importance of the issue of implicit bias. In fact, it was Chief Justice Rogers who encouraged me to attend a conference this past June in Buffalo, New York, sponsored by the National Consortium of Racial and Ethnic Fairness in the Courts. It was at that conference when I met Professor Godsill, who delivered an outstanding presentation on promising fairness in the courts, implicit bias, racial anxiety, and stereotype threat. I was thoroughly impressed with the professor's remarks and therefore invited her to Connecticut to speak, which she graciously accepted. I might note that Chief Justice Rogers is unable to be here today, but she did send a letter of support that I will read to you. Dear participants of today's program, I first want to thank you for inviting me to the conference entitled Demystifying Implicit Bias, Insights for Change. Regrettably, I am unable to attend as the Supreme Court is hearing cases this morning. We all owe a huge thanks to the Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparity in the Criminal Justice System for confronting the serious issue of implicit bias. This is a critically important area for our courts throughout the country, and I'm certain that the agenda today will be helpful in continuing to tackle the very real ramifications of implicit bias. I'm also grateful to Justice Lubbie Harper Jr. for the leadership he has brought to the Commission and to everyone who participated in planning and organizing the program, and to all the speakers who have taken the time to be here today. In closing, there is no question that we must provide access to justice for all the people we serve. If we are to achieve the goal, then we must challenge the consequences of implicit bias head on. Programs such as today, which offer action steps and solutions, are an integral step in the process. And I look forward to a summary of your discussions, ideas, and recommendations so that we can then incorporate into the system. Thank you again for being here and for the work that you do to ensure equal justice for all. Now, I might note that the Chief Court Administrator, I believe Honorable Pat Carroll is here. And if so, Pat, I certainly want to thank you for your continuous support of the Commission's work. I also want to thank the many people who made this important event possible. Thank you to President Dorsey Kendrick and the Gateway Community College community for allowing us to use its wonderful facility. Hosting such a program is no easy task, and we appreciate both your hospitality and attention to details. I also want to thank the supervisors, colleagues, friends, and neighbors who learned of this event, and with the recognition of its importance, took the time to encourage others to attend as well. Thank you to the members of the Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparity in the Criminal Justice System, who have put a great deal of time and effort into planning this conference. A grateful thank you must be extended to the Racial Profiling Prohibition Project for its financial contribution. Special thanks must be extended to Aileen Keys and Hannah Hurwitz of the Institute for Municipal and Regional Policy, Deborah Fuller and Troy Brown of the Judicial Branch for their tireless and unyielding efforts in working to make today's program a reality. Our program format is as follows. Following Professor Gossell's presentation, we will have breakout sessions followed by lunch from 12:45 to 2 p.m. After lunch, we will have a panel discussion on how implicit biases influence criminal justice involvement. After the panel discussion, Professor Gossell hopefully will make some closing remarks. It might be of interest to note that the Commission's interest in implicit bias dates back to 2010, when we co-sponsored the first ever joint training program for public defenders and prosecutors at Quinnipiac Law School. Our keynote speaker was Jerry Kahn, professor of law at UCLA. This extraordinary event was revered for its expert content and the unique opportunity it provided to engage in shared learning with colleagues otherwise on the other side of the courtroom. The information provided during the training has been the impetus for the Commission's efforts to incorporate the growing body of knowledge on implicit bias and the impact that they have on behavior and decision-making in a formal judicial processes. It has enjoyed working with members of the Connecticut Jury Instruction Committee to incorporate language on implicit bias in jury instructions, thereby increasing awareness of the existence of implicit bias in all persons, which will then improve the neutrality of decision-making in Connecticut courts. Although the addition of instructions on implicit bias is a great achievement, the Connecticut Commission carries no delusion that such language is the solution to biases. Biases influence in judicial decision-making. It is the commitment demonstrated by the people of this state to remain abreast of the new knowledge and to incorporate its lessons into its practices that brings us closer to the outcomes we strive for, just and equitable system. Although the impact of implicit bias in the criminal and civil judicial systems is crucial, it is not the only environment within which their unchecked influences can result in significant harm to a person and community's well-being. For true justice must take a broader look at the impact of implicit biases. We are fortunate today to have with us our keynote speaker, Professor Rachel Gossell, to guide us towards a greater understanding of the implicit biases that we all carry, as well as racial anxiety and stereotype which influences our behavior. Professor Gossell is a professor of law at Seton Hall Law School. She is co-founder and director of research for the Perception Institute, a national consortium of social scientists law professors, and advocates focusing on the role of the mind sciences in law, policy, and institutional practices. Her expertise stretches beyond the influence of biases and anxiety in judicial system to include housing, education, environment, and the economy. Professor Gossell is a lead author of the report, The Science of Equality, Volume 1, and A Tale of Two Neighborhoods. Both of these publications provide incredibly valuable information regarding the issue of implicit bias. The foreword to Volume 1 of The Science of Equality details in graphic description one of the reasons for us to confront and to deal honestly with the issue of implicit bias. Quoting from selected parts, the report reads as follows. Last year, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, honoring the historic struggles for racial equality and justice waging during the Civil Rights Movement. And yet, in the past few years, we have seen far too many killings of unarmed Black young people rise to the level of national public consciousness, some within the span of just a few months. With each death, we have committed a new name to memory, and the list is growing. With each new name, we have learned their unique personal histories and debated different accounts of what might have happened in each instance. Mostly, we have mourned the eerily familiar similarity in each of their tragic deaths. How Black people, particularly men and boys, are perceived is inherently linked to their survival. Perception can mean the difference between life and death. Even more familiar is the polarized, defensive, and entrenched way in which our racial discourse respond to these losses. Families, friends, and advocates are outrageously put in the position of defending the basic humanity of the victims just to secure the most minimal inquiry into justice that we be so easily afforded to most other Americans. Many others legitimately struggle with racial ambivalence as they reconcile their own experience around race with the alarming patterns of systemic injustice being revealed with such frequency. And predictably, a small but vocal minority will leap to justify the killings and excuse a world in which Black men and boys should be feared and assumed criminals until proven otherwise. Our challenge is to find inroads to a meaningful, productive conversation, addressing the perceptual challenges Black men and boys face, which now often ends before it really gets going. As important as implicit bias is to understanding race in our daily lives, however, at its best, it is a diagnosis of perception. What we desperately need to move forward is a prescription grounded as much in the complexity of the mind as in our historical analysis of structural barriers. Implicit bias and perceptions are often seen as individual problems, when in fact they are structural barriers to equality. This powerful narrative is a call for action. It is a demand that requires all of us to recognize that implicit bias is so vital to the preservation of our criminal justice system. It's really that basic. For democracy to work, people must have faith in their courts. That faith is rooted in the belief that justice is blind and that the rule of law will prevail. Without that, we lose, for we depend on that faith to sustain a democratic government. In other words, we cannot afford to do nothing. We need to take action against implicit biases because it is the right thing to do. We tell our children every day to do the right thing, to look beyond what's on the outside of a person. I say to you that the message should also apply to adults. The knowledge you gain here today will make a significant difference in the field, whether you are in a police cruiser or in a courtroom. The people we serve deserve a justice system that is fair and impartial, and where, regardless of race, religion, culture, or station in life, everybody is treated equally and with respect. So to be cognizant of the implicit biases we all have, to know the consequences that it may have, is to make a difference. One step at a time, one case at a time. Albert Einstein once said, the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. Let us do something. By being here today, you have heeded a call to action. You have made it clear that you believe you can still make a difference by acquiring new and valuable insights about an issue that is plaguing our society. We're fortunate to have an extraordinary woman as our keynote speaker, a woman whose work in the area of implicit bias has revolutionized not only how we see others, but ourselves. Her work forces us to look in the mirror and closely examine how we process input from our fellow men and women. She teaches us that while we more often than not profess to have no bias, our inner self is telegraphing a different message. So now let's learn about the message. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Rachel Garcia.